Okay, here's an AutoCAD drawing I printed off, sourced from Ed Hawley's neck drawing. I'm just taking a couple of sections of the neck. Here you can see the profile slice of the headstock end. And this I used to make my blocks at the heel end of the headstock. Here you have the plug section in here. This is my nut slot. And I extended the center line of the route, or the rod, and I extended it at a straight line at 3 degrees, and I tried to use round figures here. So from the fret side of the nut, I go 3 13/16 to this position, and wherever that intersects with my extended center line, I come up with 15/16. So I know when I make my block, my entry drill will be 15/16, and that'll come up 3 degrees. And I also know that my position will be 3 13/16 if I measure it from the back of the fret slot. If anything, I would want to err to the side of being too low, which would mean I'd pull this block further back, and that'll drop down the center line, because if I come up too high, the material in here is going to become less and less, and I could end up with cracking possibly at the center of the fingerboard at this point. Especially if I'm working at slotting, if there's any pressure in there, it could crack. I haven't had it happen yet, but it's possible, I suppose. Also, when you're drilling your plug hole, you want to be past your fret slot or your nut slot, because you don't want to have your nut slot sitting over top or your anchor sitting beneath your nut slot, because when you start doing your nut slot, you'll find you're into metal. So you want to be nicely past that. When doing the bullet truss rod adjustment, the nut that goes in there, I'll have to modify the nut to accommodate the adjustment nut, because obviously I'm not going to be filing a ring around the entire bullet. So that is the headstock. There's another shot again. And then once I've drilled my hole at my 3 degrees, and I use my drill press and just rotate my table to my 3-degree position, then I do my cutout so that I can fit the block over top of the headstock. I leave about a good 1/16, maybe a little bit less of material if I haven't gone to a finished point on the headstock, and try and get as much material out of here as possible. And that's how I do the headstock. Okay, now we're looking at the heel end of the neck, and the same process. I'm working with an extended line off the center of the truss rod at 2.8 degree, and at 3/4 of an inch past the neck, I have a distance of 11/16 from the bottom of the from the base, and I know I can drill my hole here and extend it 2.8 degrees, and when I use this distance, I should line up nicely with the truss rod route and be right in place. Of course, you want to confirm that and just double check. What I do is I also run a line here along the back of the heel, and I put in my center line. With the block in place, I just slide my drill bit in and see that it lines up with that intersection on the heel of the neck, and so far it's worked out well. And you'll see that in the other videos, that the hole lines up really nicely with the channel. It comes up just at this point here without any gouging into this area here. Not that that would be a big issue. That would be easily fixed. And yeah, so that's it. Okay, we're going to be looking at the blocks that I use for my headstock hole and my heel end hole. Here you'll see the headstock block has the cutout to make room for the headstock to fit underneath, and it's using the template insert. On the other side, there is no template insert because it gets so close to the headstock I don't have room for one, so it's actually just the 3/8 hole that I drill part of the way through, and then my other side for the insert. You can see part of the knurling of the insert there, and that's on a 3-degree angle on the block. This is a nice a piece of hard maple, so that I know it'll last a bit longer and stay true to the bit size for a while anyways. Here we have the heel block, Just because of the way it works, I can use an insert on both sides. There's the the back side, excuse me, and the side facing the heel. And that's that. This is just the insert here for the 3/8. And I'll be using a Warmoth nut, 1 inch. Actually, this is only 7/8 of an inch tall, and then the washer is 3/32. So I drilled a hole that was a depth of 1 inch into the heel. That worked well. I also have this piece of 2 inch 3/8 rod that I drilled through. This is my cheater piece. What I did on the next, and I didn't show it, but I'll show you in a minute, is once I did my 3/8 hole, I inserted this cheater bushing into the hole of the heel. You see here that the entry hole is nice and centered. The exit hole is actually slightly off. That wasn't intentional, but it ended up being a good thing. What I did was insert this into the hole, and then when I pushed my 3/16 drill bit into the hole, I could rotate this bushing and I could line it up with the channel perfectly so that there was no wandering. This does a couple of things. It gets the bit closer to the wood into the heel closer, and it reduces any wandering. If I were to just drill into the 3/8 hole and then catch the hole at the end that the pilot bit would have made, there would have been some wandering due to the fact that the hardwood takes a little more time to drill. I take little depths and pull out and get rid of any shavings so that it doesn't build up and create problems. So that's my cheater bit. I do the same thing at the headstock, and it seems to work really well. I can rotate this and I can dial in just where that bit's going to end up, whether it's skewed to the right or left. I can just rotate that, and that really makes a difference. I get kind of nervous when I'm doing a blind drilling like that, and so I've come up with a solution that works for me. You may not have that problem, but when I first started doing these necks, I noticed that I was always off a little bit, and I like to get as close as I can to perfect with the truss rod channel as possible. With this Warmoth net here, I think I'm going to personalize it a little bit. I'll show you later what I do with that. And now I'm going to show you just the schematics that I use to make these blocks. Knowing exactly where to have my start and finish holes helps me line up the entry drilling a lot easier. Alright, so we're looking at a shot down the truss rod, and I've got the insert in place and the drill bit, and you can see that that bit is not going to line up with the truss rod, and by the time it gets into the channel it's going to be off to the side. I'm going to turn the neck around so you can see the plug in place and just how I've made the change. So here you can see, I'm just trying to line it up so you can see the drill bit nicely in line with the route. There should be no problem there. And as you can see, the whole exit hole of the heel here came into the channel really nice.
Alright, here's some complimentary shots of me drilling the heel and the headstock. I'm using a 3/8 Craig jig bit. It gives me a nice flat bottom, and a pilot bit to make sure I'm nicely in center. And it turned out well. I went in the depth of 1 inch, just to recap. Here I'm using a 3/8 by 18 inch wood bit with a collar for my stop, for my depth. And I'm using my insert that I spoke of earlier, my little cheater insert with a 3/16 bit. And I pull out periodically so that it doesn't build up chips and that it could push the drill bit around or tighten up too much. And here's a finished shot. You see my cross lines for my centering, and the hole ended up nicely touching or just coming at the trough of the route, and the truss rod should fit really nicely in there. I'm quite pleased with how it turned out, and I'll have to make sure that I continue to do the same process and I'll have no problems. Nicely centered, as you can see there. And we're going to have a look at the headstock in a second. We'll just ponder this for a moment. Alright, now we move on to the headstock. We can't really see the other side where the channel is, but you get the idea. Next we'll build the truss rod and skunk strip.